This week we're going to remake an 80s classic. Bastian is a young boy who's dealing with a hard time and stumbles across a magical book that transports him to the land of Fantasia. This is one of those movies that everybody says they'd never want remade, yet if you watch it, desperately seems to need a remake. It needs a fresh coat of paint. So what we do is we jump into the book ourselves. We think we've come up with some great ideas for you guys about Atreyu, Bastian, the Empress, and especially the Nothing. And that luck dragon. What was up with that luck dragon? We're going to talk about that too. Right now, it is time to remake the NeverEnding Story right. Hello, my fellow cinematic architects, and welcome to Remake This Movie Right. We are a member of the Hollywood Outsider Network. Listen to episodes of Remake This Movie Right on iTunes, where reviews are appreciated, your podcast app of choice, or just visit the website at RemakeThisMovieRight.com. Remake This Movie Right is a show where we take an original film that has an actual remake in the works, figure out what still clicks and what doesn't, throw a little bit of humor at it, and then determine exactly how Hollywood should remake it. So by the end of each episode, we will have the remake ready to roll for Hollywood execs and present it to you in movie trailer form. We are here to tell Hollywood how to remake this movie right. I am your host, Aaron Peterson, and joining me today, you might remember him from our Tomb Raider and Weird Science episodes, the host of The Gaming Outsider, Scotty Clark.
Well, hello, sir.
Hello. And a first-timer on our show, but an expert on all things 80s. He's the host of the 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast, Dave White. Welcome, Dave.
Hold on. Okay. An expert? Wow.
I mean, you got a whole show.
I don't know about that.
You got a whole show.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. Now, if you have a whole show called 80s Reboot Podcast, doesn't that make you an expert, like by proxy?
Well, I think so, but we just kind of make it up as we go along. So it's not like we actually do research or anything. Is that required?
No, sure. Just wing it. That's what we expect from our compatriots. Well, this episode of Remake This Movie Right, we are going to remake the NeverEnding Story, which has been requested several times, and wow, we just rewatched it. We'll get into that in a second.
This is going to be the longest episode ever, right?
It might be, because it's never going to end. Based on the book by Michael Ende, this is revolves around Bastian, a troubled boy who recently lost his mother, who gets lost in a mysterious book which takes him to the magical world of Fantasia. It's called Fantastica in the book, where he must fight a disastrous cannibal of worlds known as the Nothing. I gotta ask right off the bat, we all three just recently rewatched this thing. Dave, you can go first. You've never been on our show. What do you feel about NeverEnding Story? What does it say to you? What are your first memories of it? How do you think of it when you think of it?
Well, yeah, there's so much of it. I mean, when I was a kid, I really loved the practical effects. There was the rock biter, the stupid bat, Falcor. This is kind of just a staple of the 80s for me, being an 80s kid. And there are certain moments that really stuck with me. Artax, when he died in the Swamp of Sadness.
Oh, I cried as a kid.
Yeah, I mean,
you cried on Saturday. What are you talking about?
That's true.
And I did it again as an adult. You're right. It's like I had that moment. I was watching with my youngest daughter, and that moment was on, and it was kind of tugging at the heartstrings a little bit. But it was just a little dust in my eye. It wasn't really crying. And so there's so many of those type of moments that I really remembered as a kid, but rewatching it some of those things really transcended well, where I was like, oh yeah, I'm reliving that moment, but then there was other things that didn't work as well.
Well, we'll get into that part.
Right.
What about you, Scott? What are your first memories of the NeverEnding Story?
Well, I mean, who didn't want a luck dragon? I mean, that whole concept of a flying dragon that talks and was your buddy and help you beat up bullies was just like a fantasy that I think everybody wanted to have. But I outside of the spectacle of things that I was seeing on screen, this movie really sparked my imagination as a kid and really kind of gave me a love for literature. It made me, realize that when I read books, I'm not literally, but in my mind, transported to another world. And I was a big reader as a kid, and this movie kind of solidified that for me. It made me realize, yeah, I'm doing something awesome, because I was that kid that was always in trouble for being rude, for having my nose in a book, when there was company or people were around, and this kind of made me feel like, well, that's why I want to escape and be somewhere else and have all these fantastic adventures, and that, and the aspect of the inclusion of Bastian into the story by the end was so mind-blowing to me, and something that I wanted to experience so badly. I wanted to read a book and then be a part of that book, and me having some ownage or ownership of the way that's ownage. I know I try to make
up new words today.
Ownership of how that story ended. I mean, I did you guys read those like choose your own adventure books as a kid?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
Those were awesome. And to me, this was like so much better because the book actually called him by name. And the book knew about the bullies chasing him into the bookstore, and like even just thinking about it now, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about that happening in real life, like I did when I was a kid, and just it did things for me that my child brain hadn't experienced at the time, and I just have so many good memories of it.
Now, did Gamork scare you?
Oh yes, scared the crap out of me when I was a kid.
Yes, definitely.
I gotta admit that actually holds up. Like of all the things in the movie that we're gonna talk about that don't quite hold up, that little wolf or whatever he is, it actually holds up.
Yeah, I agree. It's still, I mean, it obviously still looks very mechanical.
Well, I mean, I didn't say it. I would run in terror if I saw it on the street.
Well, I mean, a part of that is because a lot of that time Gamorka was very much hidden in the darkness. You didn't see him in full light like you did the Rockbiter or Morla. Those were it was basically daylight when you saw those. But when you saw Gamork up close and personal, he was kind of in the shadows and he was hiding, and he was scared too, with Fantasia falling apart. So it was really, really cool.
See, I get to be, I guess, in the minority to a degree, where I remember watching the movie as a kid, but it wasn't like one of my all-time favorites or anything. But I definitely had memories of watching it as a kid because I remember like it just sparked the imagination. And then Dave really wanted to do this one. Scott really wants to do this one. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll rewatch it and see what I'm not remembering. And like a lot of things just clicked. Like I watched it a lot more than I thought I did because I remembered everything that happened. And that stupid song won't leave my head still. NeverEnding Story.
I've been singing it all week.
Oh, Lord. It just wouldn't go away. and I remembered the biggest thing I remembered, which is the one thing I'll talk about when we get to what doesn't work. But the dragon, you're all excited about the dragon. The dragon creeped me the hell out. I'll explain why when we get there. But the dragon did not. That creeped me out.
Well, too, if you look at the cover of this movie, like the actual box art, that dragon looks way cooler on the box art than he does in the movie.
Most definitely. You are so right.
Because that box art makes that movie look even cooler than the movie actually is, and he looks more friendly and less creepy. Well, we're going to get
less
to that
like
too,
he's got a panel van. Yeah, he's a little less creepy.
It's been probably a decade since I've seen this movie, and I kind of went into it expecting it just to be awful. I just, kind of wear nostalgic glasses maybe, and I look past it, but I was surprised at how much still actually worked. I mean, we're going to go off things that don't work, but I mean, the storytelling, the interaction with these characters, and just how it all wraps up, like I said, with the inclusion of the reader, the complexity yet simplicity of the nothing. I mean, it's a character, if you would call it a character, it's this thing that is nothing called the nothing. But it's like the worst thing imaginable. It's just absorbing everything. And the metaphor of basically the absence of imagination and how that's like a risk to children's lives. I just love it. It just made me want to go buy a stack of books when I was a kid.
Well, from what I picked up on this was the ongoing theme of believing in yourself. And it's just a message that they kept kind of pumping in, throughout the story. And I guess as a kid, I really didn't pick up on that as much as I did as now a father watching it with my kid. I was like, that's really a great message that they're putting out there in this movie. And it really came across really well, just the way they put it together.
Now, would you ever let your kid go for a stroll with, say, a luck dragon?
Based on what you were saying earlier, I'm worried now.
Wait till you hear the first clip. I'm telling you, you will be like, you know what? No, probably not. I'm definitely not. Let's get some trivia before we get into what we love and what we don't love about the original in terms of preparing for our remake. Falkor is actually a 43-foot long motorized creature with 6,000 plastic scales and pink feather fur. His head is 3 feet tall and long and had a large tongue in the mouth. That was kind of cool. That was actually 100% full creature.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. According to the book, this is one thing that Scott was really trying to clarify. According to the book, the name that Bastian screams almost indecipherably into the night is Moonchild. But it has often been debated what Barrett Oliver actually says at that moment, which rewatching it, I think we can hear it pretty clear.
Yeah, I think he says child with 3 syllables.
Child. Like Axl Rose.
Well, that was right as that big thunderstorm was striking, so it was a little difficult to hear.
Yeah, it was.
I rewound that as a kid to try to understand what he was saying, even with my parents. Like, what is he saying? And we backed it up probably a dozen times, and we still could never figure out what it was.
That's definitely 80s right there. You rewound it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Exactly.
I didn't hit 15 seconds back. I actually had to press the rewind button.
Yeah. Author Michael Ende felt that the movie did not follow closely to the book. Felt that the book that he didn't follow it at all, according to him. That he urged that production be shut down or the title of the movie be changed. Because the producers refused to do either, Ende filed a lawsuit against the producers. He ended up losing the case. That sucks. That when you have that discord between a writer and a studio.
I've not read the book. Have either of you?
No.
I read it when I was a kid, but I did a lot of research reminding myself of this because the book is different. Because it's kind of like where the movie, and this part I'm trying to go off memory. The movie ends kind of like halfway through the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the book actually gets really dark the second half. Because Bastian. And I want to hold that because it actually comes in play with my remake. So I'll explain where I am on that later. But Atreyu, he was green in the book. He wasn't.
He was green?
He was green. He wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't this white Navajo, whatever he is, with a wide open shirt like he's in a Whitesnake video or whatever. And, it wasn't any of that. So a couple more fun little tidbits. The name of the mythic land in the book was actually Fantastica. It was changed to Fantasia because it felt like it flowed smoother.
It does. Fantastica sounds...
Fantastica?
No.
Yeah, it's a little harder on the to roll out. Fantasia is a lot more smoother.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we'll see what Disney has to say about that. At the time of its release, it was the most expensive film produced outside of the United States and the Soviet Union, something like $27 million or something like that. A cool bit about the book is in some renditions of it, the font is actually in different colors. Red for reality and blue for Fantastica. I thought that was kind of an interesting little tidbit.
Just like the Bible.
Yes, this is just like the Bible. Only the Bible has an ending. Email us your thoughts on this week's show, casting ideas, or your short pitch to remake this movie right at gmail.com. We might mention it on the next teaser episode. We're going to talk a little bit more about the original before we get into our remake. But first, we've got a great clip to remind you just how creepy the Luck Dragon really, really is. Take a listen.
I was trying to
sneak away.
Yeah. No.
I like children.
For breakfast?
Never. I'm a luck dragon. My name is Falcor.
And my name is...
Atreyu. And you're on a quest.
How'd you know that?
You were unconscious. And you talked in your sleep.
Yeah, nothing weird about that at all.
Out of context, that just sounds so wrong.
It does.
You were unconscious.
You were. And then he's like, come touch me behind my ear. Scratch it right there. That's the spot. All right, so what makes this movie so memorable? You guys talked a little bit about it, so I don't want you to duplicate, but what are the specific memories that you have about it in terms of favorite moments in the movie, great ideas that you got besides what you've already talked about? Scotty?
Well, one that I wanted to mention was at the very beginning of the movie, because I kind of have a question about it, actually, and I want to see if you guys agree with me or not. Bastian goes into the bookstore, and the bookstore owner is telling him that this book is not for him. And in my mind, as I was growing up watching this, he was using reverse psychology to get him to steal the book because he realized that he was a reader after he listed off all the books he read and wanted him to take this book. But after watching it this weekend, I kind of wondered if that was the case or not, because he grins when he realizes that the boy leaves. But does he realize that the book is gone and is just grinning because finally this annoying kid is out of his store? Because then he looks down at the note where Bastian leaves the note that says, I promise I'll bring your book back. And he looks kind of concerned, like, oh, what did you leave? So did he want him to take the book or did he not? Because in my mind, I want him to take the book.
Dave?
I believe he wanted him to take the book. When I was rewatching it, that's what the whole time I was watching that scene, that's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You're right, reverse psychology. He wanted him to, just to take the book and enjoy it. But yeah, I guess thinking about it now with that final moment where he had that concerned look, yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, if you looked at it as a different light, there is that possibility that, yeah, maybe he didn't. He was just trying to be the kind, gentle old man, I guess, at that moment to help him get away from his bullies. Maybe that's the reason why, because he found like a kindred soul that liked books, and that's the reason why he was smiling in the first place.
And that's what I want it to be, especially with how thick he was laying on this. This book is not for you, and your books don't come to life, and you just put them up, and then they're safe. To me, he was intriguing him to want to read the book, and that always stuck in my head as yes. Make him want to read that book. Make him he's like you said, found a kindred spirit and somebody that can relate to it. And he more or less was putting him through this test to say, are you worthy to read this book? And when he passed it, then he basically said, oh, I got to go get the phone.
Mm-hmm. That's what I got out of it.
Okay,
he was enticing him to read it. He was teasing him. He's almost like a luck dragon would. Maybe I'm reading. Maybe I'm watching this movie wrong. Maybe that's what the problem is.
You ruined my childhood, man, watching this movie with you, because I never once even considered Falcon to be creepy.
Never once.
Sorry.
Then you play that clip out of context, and it's just
try arguing it now.
Something out of Silence of the Lambs. I like children.
Oh man, the thing that I love most about this movie are the themes behind it, the ideas behind it. You guys talked a little bit about it already. The imagination being lost. I think it's never been more true than now. So I mean, the story itself is completely relevant. I don't know how many kids have no imagination anymore. I mean, you talk to them, and if it's not on TV, or if it's not on Twitter, or if it's not on Facebook or whatever, they can't think outside of that their box. They're stuck in their box. Even though this movie did not hold up production wise, the themes are fantastic. And I don't see that kind of spark of wonder, of imagination. I mean, almost like that little Spielbergian touch from the 80s. You don't see that anymore. You just don't. I mean, movies just, because they can do so much, they don't leave anything to your imagination. They don't spark your imagination. They just don't make you think, to dream, to believe in something that isn't, right in front of you. So I love the themes. The themes are really what stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be remiss if we don't bring up the gnomes, where they have that banter about the scientific advice, and then the other one being the doctor. I mean, that was just so humorous.
Oh, you mean Miracle Max from The Princess Bride?
Exactly. That's the exact comparison I was going to draw. That's exactly what it felt like to me, and it was just funny, the banter, between those two, and, where she's trying to heal him, and, and then he goes on to say, no, you're done now. Now it's my turn. This is the scientific thing. You need to get past the Southern Oracle. And it was just really funny. I really enjoyed that.
To kind of piggyback on what you're saying about the characters, I really felt that each of the characters, even the ones that had tiny little roles in this movie, were just so memorable. You mentioned earlier the bat, and I don't know what the creature's name was that rode the bat or used him as a parasailer, or not a parasail.
A parasailer. It's pretty close.
What do you call it?
It was a glider.
Yeah. Glider. Yeah, he used him as a glider. And the guy that had the racing snail, Morla, the whole idea where Morla got tired of talking to, is it a he or a she? I don't even know.
Let's go with it.
With it. Talking to itself, and so basically developed its own character. Just tiny little things like that don't need any further, a whole lot of explanation more than just one line of dialogue. We're just so interesting, I want to see more characters like that you just kind of touch here and there.
Yeah, that whole dialogue with the rock biter, and he's like, these powerful hands, and it was just really well done. A really good speech there.
Yeah, he said it twice, and even the second time, it just felt like he was so sad. Out of a puppet. That's really
yeah,
awesome.
Out of a puppet. The sad part is I'm hearing so many inappropriate things in my head, because now that's how I perceive the movie. I feel so bad. All right, well, what doesn't work? I mean, in terms of like what doesn't hold up well, the story, effects, music, anything.
I really like the way the practical effects, that they tried to do the practical effects, but I don't think they transcended through the time very well.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't feel, looking at it now from a 2016 perspective, it just didn't feel as memorable with the practical effects. I appreciate the fact that they were trying, but it just didn't look as good as it may have when I was a kid in the 80s. So I think that doesn't work well.
Wait, real quick, I want to ask you before you continue. Do you
Yeah.
do you think we were debating this when you're watching the practical effects? Do you think the voices talk slower because the mouth animation couldn't keep up with normal? Because I mean, every character that isn't human talks very slow, very methodical, very leisurely paced.
Yeah, I believe they had to do something like that in order to do the production well, to line up the speech with the mouth movement.
Mhm.
So, that's probably done, in, the movie production, in order to make it work. So I think that was done on purpose.
Okay, that was just something that popped in my head, and I wanted to get it out there. All right, continue. You had more.
Well, the only other thing that really didn't work well for me is my older self really didn't feel that invested with what was going on with Bastian.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, really didn't get any kind of connection with that character.
Yeah, there wasn't enough development with him. When he's
Right.
having that conversation with Major Dad in the kitchen at the beginning of the movie,
Major Dad.
it's just, oh, yeah, mom's dead. You're gonna have to deal with it and get your head out of the clouds.
Right.
End of conversation. Yeah, you're right, Dad, and that's it.
Yeah, and then he just goes, hides, and then we get involved in the story, which is what loops us in. The whole world in Fantasia. That's equivalent to the Wizard of Oz. You're waiting for Dorothy to get into Munchkinland for the to really get invested into the story.
Mm-hmm.
This is the same kind of thing here. And it was kind of like, did I really connect with Bastian? Not entirely. I mean, I felt sorry for him. That's about it.
Because you don't really get a whole lot of quality time. I mean, quality time is important. And if you're going to be so connected if we're supposed to be so connected to Bastian, I think that's an important piece.
Mm-hmm.
You have to build that up to some degree. The effects were a big one for me. The clouds were cool. I don't think the clouds were cool, but everything else was it's just dated. I don't blame it's hard to blame a movie when it's like 30 years old. It's 30 years old. It's not going to hold up for the most part. Falcor takes me out of the movie every time.
He does now.
Well, he did then. I'm telling you, that's the one thing I remembered when I was watching it, because I remembered that, and I even called my mom afterward. I'm like, Mom, do you remember that movie? She's like, yes, you used to make all these creepy jokes about the creepy dog. I'm like, so it's not like it just came up. I've always felt that way. I just forgot about it until we started watching it again. I'm like, that's why it weirded me out a little bit. The pedophile dog. Yeah.
All right, he's not a dog, okay?
Well, I mean, he looks like a dog. I mean, he's like, come scratch me, sexy, and all that other super creepy stuff. He's always winking at this kid. This kid's shirt's wide open. I mean, he winks at him at least 16 times. I mean, go watch it. Trust me. You're going to have a hard time watching this
There is a lot of
movie
winking
now.
going on.
I cannot rewatch this movie now.
Just count the winks. It's like, wait, if it's more than 3 times, we're in love. That's the way I look at it. That's
And
my
the
rule.
tree did have a kind of a Fabio thing going on.
Oh, yeah. Like every once in a while, there's like little kid nipples. And I'm like, whoa. I was telling Scott, I'm like, I can't watch a movie where there's kid nipples. And he's like, why? Like, I don't know. But I think that brings me to the one thing I don't like now is that I think because we're all so jaded. Well, I'm speaking for myself. Okay. I'm so jaded that I have a hard time watching this. And maybe it's because I'm well into adulthood. I'm not a kid anymore. It's hard for me to grasp the innocence of watching it. I think to probably a kid, 10, 12 years old, a normal kid, none of all that stuff would just be wonder and innocence and amazement. And I'm sitting here focusing, why is that kid's shirt billowing in the wind? And why is the dragon winking and stuff like that? It's just, I think to really appreciate this movie, you have to be a child or really desperately want to be a child or want to recapture your childhood.
I think that's fair. It's a movie that would be hard to introduce to a younger audience today, or especially an adult audience that's never seen it before.
Oh yeah,
it'd be like me watching Labyrinth for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I think unless you're big on opiates, I don't think it's gonna work for you. Maybe there's a lot of alcohol near you. That might work.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you've never seen it, I don't think watching it now is going to convince you it's a great movie. But if you watched it in 1980, in the 80s, that's the different story.
Yeah, it's a product of its time for sure.
I gotta say though, I was watching it with my 7-year-old daughter, and she loved it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
See, that's when maybe it's the innocence. It's just she has the innocence, and it's just like sparks wonder in her mind because she doesn't care about all the special effects and everything else. She doesn't care about the creepy dragon. She's just watching this world that she could only imagine come to life. And I think that's the beauty of this movie is it sparks that in children, and you don't realize why.
Yeah, we forget sometimes as adults that children are experiencing some things for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I got a buddy that has a son that's less than 2 years old, and he tells me stories about whenever he gives the kid new food. Like the first time he gave him strawberries, and just like the look of joy on this kid's face when he's tried a new food, and it was like an eye-opening experience for me that there are some things that we take for granted because we've had them for the past 30 or in Aaron's case 40 years of our lives.
Wow, that's right below the belt, man.
But kids don't, and kids aren't jaded. They're not worried about pedophiles.
Pedophile dragons.
Pedophile dragons. They're not worried about things like that we look at things as being creepy, and like you said, the innocence of youth and that untarnished brain and untarnished experience that they've got. They're not diluted by all the garbage that's out in the world. They can just enjoy the movie for what it is.
Yeah.
I got one thing that I do want to mention that doesn't work for me too. It's a thing that I loved growing up as a kid, and I don't know why, and that's the Orin. The Orin is the symbol that's on the front of the book, and it's a like a talisman basically that Atreyu wears throughout the movie. It's this really cool design. It's like these two snakes that are interwoven, different colors, and they make kind of a symbol. And I loved it. And I was like, man, the Orin, really cool. And then I'm watching the movie this weekend, and I'm going, that Orin had served no purpose whatsoever, except for at the very end when they're trying to find the ivory tower. We'll let the Orin guide us. Oh, you mean go in the same straight line we've been flying in this entire time? There's the ivory tower.
Well, yeah, but see, the power, I think, of everything is in that Orin, if I remember right. It's like, I'm trying to remember from the book. Yeah, from the book. So, like, all the wishes that he makes and everything else, like, the power comes from that Orin.
Mm-hmm.
Orin, however you say it. And so I think it's more important in the book than it is in the movie.
And like you said, the movie happened about halfway through the book, so I imagine the second half probably alludes to that a lot more.
Oh, man, yeah. And I'll talk about that because the second half of the book is not what you think it's going to be, which is what makes it kind of cool. But we'll get into that. Should the movie even get a remake? I guess is the final question. Before we jump into our remake, should the movie get a remake?
I would say yes. I think that it would be interesting to try to encapsulate those themes that really made this a good movie of the 80s and try to redo that with a modern take on it. I think if you can pull that off, then I think it would be really well done. So I believe that remake would work if done right.
Scotty?
I agree. This isn't a perfect movie by any means, but at the same time, this is one that I will still watch. I actually bought this movie when we mentioned we were going to do this podcast. I had such good memories of it. I said, you know what, screw it, I'm going to buy it. And I feel like I'm going to go back and watch it again, like not another 10 years. Like I have full intention to watch it again. I like the movie as it is, but I understand it's not perfect, but it is completely open to being remade. I think this is a story that could be enjoyed by the next generation but be updated. I don't know about so much with the times as far as like the modern day aspect of the film, but just graphics and special effects really just needs to get a fresh coat of paint, but still retain some of that charm.
Yeah, same here. I think it desperately needs a remake. I'm just leery about is there anybody in Hollywood right now that could do it. And I'm sure everybody's going to be like J.J. Abrams because of the go-to Spielberg these days. But I really don't know if he'd be the right guy for it. But we're going to get into that, who we think we should make it, how it should be done, everything else that we talk about on Remake This Movie Right. But we got another clip to lead us to it. This one's less creepy, I promise. Ish.
Do you recognize this?
Well, we haven't seen the Orin in a long time.
We? Is there someone else here too?
We haven't spoken to anyone else for thousands of years. So we started talking to ourselves.
Poor turtle sounds like he's going to die any minute, man.
You know, we mentioned earlier how we don't like how the characters talk so slowly. That is one character that I actually appreciated how slow he or she or it talked. I think that just totally worked for that character because it was very slow moving, looked like a turtle, and the fact that it had to talk to itself, I think the slow moving worked there.
That makes sense. I mean, but there's some, like the rock giant, I guess I get because he's so huge. Rock biter, sorry. It's the same difference. But then you've got several other characters that I thought you could have snapped it up. The luck dragon definitely could have spoke a little faster. It would have came across a little less, ominous. So yeah. Here's what we know about the actual remake that's currently being worked on. Peter Jackson apparently is involved in trying to get this off the ground. Hasn't officially hit the ground running yet, but that's the scuttlebutt. I don't know if Peter Jackson will make this movie really long, like 12 hours.
Like actually never ending?
There's a good, well done. Now that I think about this. All right, so here's how we do this. Now, since NeverEnding Story is definitely getting a remake, and because nobody's going to listen to us anyway, we're going to determine how this movie should be remade. Now, we've got 3 different people. If you've never listened before, we got 3 different ideas. We're going to make it all into one cohesive movie because we leave this podcast one movie intact. We don't have 3 different movies. All remake selections that are debated on are settled by the best of 3 votes. So if there's one element 2 people agree on, we move on unless somebody wants to use their cut, which is they can yell cut at any time, and stop whatever the item is, and they can replace it with whatever their idea is, and nobody can do anything. You can't cut a cut, but each person does get 1 cut per episode. Everybody understand the rules?
Understood.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get into it. Who's got the first idea? Dave, let's start with you as your first time on the show. How would you start your NeverEnding Story, or how would you do it? Do you have a pitch? Do you have an idea? Do you know how it would begin? How would you do it?
Well, one of the things that I was trying to reimagine was how to take his gateway into Fantasia. And, do we do something with that where we don't necessarily use a book and use something a little modern? Could there be like an iOS app or an Xbox or something like that? That would be the gateway. But then I didn't really like the way that flowed, and I thought you needed something nostalgic. So I was thinking if we could do something with like a comic book or graphic novel as kind of the gateway of what he would, use to get into the NeverEnding Story, if we still had like that main character. So that was my concept to start off with.
So elaborate a little bit on how would you do it?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to have like the whole Atreyu, if this case, let's look at it as the original, and if you had an Atreyu character, it would have the accompanying, comic book series or graphic novel, or whatever it is that the Bastian type character would be reading.
Mm-hmm.
And, that would be what he would take from the comic book store or the bookstore, or whatever you want to say it. And that would be his way to get into Fantasia, so that was kind of my version of going up from, a regular book, but still be kind of nostalgic and retro at the same time.
Scott, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm with you that I don't like the idea of using an iPad or technology because, and this is coming from like the biggest technology proponent, out there. I am always trying to push my students and anybody I can to use my dad to use technology as much as possible. But I think the undertone theme of this movie is to spark your imagination without those kinds of things, with just reading. Bastian is imagining this story in his head just from reading words. I wonder if doing the graphic novel aspect of that's going to take some of that away or not. I'm not saying I don't like the idea. There's something about the simplicity of just reading that's sparking all that imagination. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one I kind of agree with Scott, and I don't like to agree with Scott. Just because just because I mean, really, the thing I love most about the original movie is it inspires children to use their own imagination. I think graphic novel, I'm already thinking pictures, and it kind of like it already puts some of the imagination already on the page as opposed to all in their head, I guess, to some degree. So I like the idea. I like the idea of making it more modern. I think in that's the one element of the movie I probably wouldn't want to change personally.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just, yeah. So
I'm not
Sorry.
trying to just shoot down every idea you've got.
hey,
here,
there's
man,
no
but-
hard feelings on this show. All right.
No,
Everybody's
not at all,
idea is
not
going
at
to get
all.
shut down at some point. That's just the way it goes. No, that's cool. At least he's thinking outside the box. Thank you for doing
yeah.
that. Too many people
No
come out here and be like, you know what? I just make the same old movie.
Well, he didn't go full Heinrichs on us or anything.
Oh Lord, man. Have you heard an episode with Troy Heinrichs on it? You should
Um,
definitely listen to one because he goes out there. He'd already have robots in this somewhere. In the book, here's one thing that I found. I went through and like kind of picked apart some of the things that I thought was a little bit cooler in the book than in the movie. This is one I kind of want to throw out there. In the book, there aren't any bullies. There's no bullies in the book. He's an overweight kid. He's not skinny. He just feels he's an outcast, so to speak. You know, he doesn't have a lot of friends, that sort of thing. His dad was the inconsolable one. His dad wasn't the one like, hey, go out there. You got to get back running. You know, his dad was really having a super hard time over his mom's death, while Bastian kind of wanted to move on. So he felt like he lost two parents, and that's why he got lost in the books, because he felt like he had nobody. And I kind of like that. I don't know if that's maybe too morbid to some degree, but I kind of like the idea that, you know, he's not, it doesn't have, to me, the bullies thing was great in the 80s, but now it's been done so many times. Like every kid that feels like an outcast is being picked on. I mean, at some point I would...
You mean like Spider-Man?
Yeah, exactly. Like Spider-Man. Every origin story, he's the same thing. So I would like, my pitch would be kick the bullies out, get rid of the bullies, kind of come back to that aspect that dad is actually the one who's just, he's distant, he's out, he's not being supportive to his son, he's too busy, he's too preoccupied with his own grief to really focus on his son. So his son, which is why I want him to steal that book and not leave a note too, because his son, you know, is just in a bad place, a lonely place. And I want him to go and get lost in this book to finally find some peace with his own world, I guess, to escape and find joy in this world kind of thing is my big pitch.
I like that idea. The one thing that I think you're going to miss by doing that is having Bastian come back to the real world with the Orin. And what's he going to wish for that's going to be as thrilling as riding a luck dragon and chasing bullies in that final scene?
Well, that's assuming that we do that. See, my idea would not involve that at all because there'd be no bullies.
Well, I understand, but there would have to be something, wouldn't there? I mean, wouldn't you want him? Bastian now has unlimited wishes, and you want to see him do some kind of wish fulfillment in the real world. What's he gonna do? He's gonna have some special bond with his dad, or what's he gonna do fantastical in real world that you can't do in a real world without the elements of Fantasia?
I don't need that part of it. To me, that wasn't an appealing part of the movie. I thought that was a ridiculous part of the movie. I honestly didn't like that part at all. This is me personally.
That's because you were the bully growing up, weren't you?
No, I was not. I was the guy trying to...
I was a big fan of that moment.
Me too.
I definitely love that moment of where he comes back from the, you know, into the real world and has the luck dragon, and, you know, in this case it was the bullies, but, you know, you're absolutely right, Scott. You know what, you know, if you had that without the bully element, then, you know, what would he use that wish for, or how would he interact with the real world? That would really be kind of empowering for him.
Well, Scott brought up a really good point when we were watching it, and I'm surprised he hasn't brought this up. But I'm giving you full credit, Scott. While we were watching it, the first thing he said was, why wouldn't he wish for his mom back?
Yeah.
Wow, good point.
And
Yeah.
that really made me wonder. I mean, that seems to me, if you give me the chance, my mom just passed away, and granted, I'm a mama's boy, so it's probably not fair. But if my mom had just passed away and I was granted the power of the Orin to wish whatever I wanted, I would wish for my mom to come back, whether it be in the real world or Fantasia. And I assume we're agreeing we're just going to keep it called Fantasia.
I'm fine with the name Fantasia. I like it.
Yeah, me too. To your point, though, I mean, he just had that moment where he helped save Fantasia. He gave, the princess her name, and he's now on this luck dragon. He just hasn't had time to process the magnitude of what he's allowed to wish for. So the first thing that pops in his head was the most recent event, and that's let's go pick on the bullies. Who knows if a later wish would be bring my mom back?
Okay.
Just thinking out loud.
Yeah, no, definitely could be. I'm sorry, Dave, did you have any other ideas for how you would want, or Scott, either one of you?
Well, I kind of want to add what you said about the real world element. I went a different direction, and now hearing yours, I think I like it better, but I thought about the idea of, instead of having his mom dead, I wanted that relationship between he and Dad to be much more volatile. Dad seemed like way too supportive, but almost non-caring at the same time. Like, you just felt like he was just going through the motions of what a dad should do and talking to his son about his mom dying. What if mom and dad were divorced and Dad is somehow blaming Bastian for their split up? You know how like in every movie the parent always says it's not your fault that mommy and daddy are getting a divorce. Mm-hmm. What if Dad is blaming Bastian somehow, not like outright saying it's your fault, but making him feel that way, and never having that moment of saying, it's not your fault. Like he says it's not your fault, but he writes on his little notepad it's totally your fault, kind of thing. Or or something, or he just never treats him like a loving parent. He just treats him like a byproduct of a relationship that went sour and ruined his life, and now he's got this constant reminder of this horrible marriage that he had. And then you could have Bastian's first wish be to have mom and dad get back together, and then you're actually introduced to mom at the very end as his first wish fulfillment.
Well, that is just very deep. That I'm just trying to process that, because I mean it's going to put on like a whole new layer to the movie, of course, because he's always going to have this. I don't want to disappoint my father even more than I have, but then I've got this other parental unit that I imagine how good she is or whatever, because she's not in the picture. I can see it working. Would her name still be Moonchild?
How is her name Moonchild if this is a movie in the 80s? He would have been conceived in the 60s for that to make sense.
Okay, so let's hold on the bookend. We'll come back to that, and we'll decide that. So that way we have time to let that sink in a little bit. Mm-hmm. One thing I wanted to bring up was the nothing looks like nothing in the book, which makes sense. You're talking about a book. But in the movie, it's just basically a storm cloud. Mm-hmm. But there's like a scene, and it always kind of bugged me that Falkor like rides through it. That irritated the crap out of me. I'm just like, you can't ride through this thing that's absorbing everything it touches, and you just zip through it. I don't like that. Should the nothing take the visual effect of something else, like instead of clouds, just as something else?
See, I didn't take it that the nothing was personified by the clouds. To me, the nothing was nothing, and the clouds and all the destruction and storm that was happening was the byproduct of it coming through. That's how I took it as a kid. Does that make sense? I mean, you can't see nothing. It's a double negative I just did there, but
Dave, how did you take it? I kind of took it as the storm was the nothing, but maybe I'm wrong.
What? No, I see what Scott is saying, and that and the way I took it was that it was just the kind of a destruction before the fact of nothing appearing, which would be absolutely nothing, right? Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying, but I always believed that the clouds was the beginning effect before the actual nothing, which was right behind it. That's the way I took it.
I feel like we're in a TurboTax commercial, by the way. Nothing is something.
It's so hard to talk about because it's just like, well, how do you visualize the nothing? Well, You don't. Why? Because it's nothing, really.
But I'd really like to see more of an interactive villain.
Okay, so how would you do that? I mean... I
just like the idea of the nothing being a void, like just being. I mean, how do you describe an empty space? I mean, if you think of like space looks black.
I kind of like the idea of you see almost like a visual effect. I see what Dave is saying, and I do like the idea of there being something, but I don't think you can have a person be that. I like the visual effect of maybe as the nothing grows closer, instead of seeing worlds decimated or something behind it, you would see just blackness. It was just empty. It just turns to darkness and you don't see anything. You can't see any destruction. You can't see chaos. It doesn't like a twister hit it. There's no storm. It's just like a very, almost like not a cloud, but just a light, a dark light moving, a darkness just moving forward, and slowly you just stop seeing what's what's there.
Yeah, because to me, the nothing was always like a giant eraser erasing the words of the page of the book.
Yeah, so I mean, I could see that. I could see it just as a visual effect where it's just darkness getting closer, and as it, closes in on heroes, it doesn't blow everything apart and everything. It just slowly eats, you just stop seeing whatever was there.
Well, yeah, because think about it, like when at the very end, when Atreyu is riding Falkor towards the Ivory Tower after the nothing has like consumed almost all of Fantasia, they're riding through space. Mm-hmm. They're riding through nothing with just fragments of Fantasia flying past them. I love the idea of almost like a black hole effect.
Well, what I was thinking was, the only comparison I have is if you think of, from the Marvel world, Galactus, and you had Silver Surfer as his herald, and the perception, in this case, it'd be Gamork, it working in league with this over-empowering nothing. So I don't know how exactly, that could be pulled off really well, but, having some sort of interactive villain that you can actually have a conversation, the hero can have a conversation to understand, why is this happening? What's going on? Some sort of motivation for the villain.
It's such an abstract concept, like to talk about nothing. I think even Rockbiter makes a comment like, well, what was it they're talking about? He's like, well, that would be something. What you just described would be something. This is nothing. There's nothing there.
Right.
I love how it made my mind bend as a kid, and I think that we got to have that element in there somewhere. Just visually, it needs to be something unique.
Going to what he said then, that if Gamork was basically, Silver Surfer, that's an interesting analogy. That works. Mm-hmm. An extension of the nothing. He is like basically the foe. He's the villain. He's the face. So you have Gamork, but we have let him have more screen time, more opportunities to face Atreyu, and they can have these discussions, so to speak. This philosophy about why the nothing is doing what they're doing. So that way you do have a face of an enemy, but the nothing is still that blackness just tearing things apart or creeping.
Yeah, it's still there, but you would have that agent to interact with.
Yeah, I like that. I like an expanded, because you don't really get Gamork. I mean, Gamork has really like one scene in the entire movie where we could beef it up and give him several.
And it could be this looming threat that's following Atreyu as Atreyu's on his quest. Because really in the movie, Atreyu doesn't really have a whole lot of direction. Start out with, he just kind of heads off and gonna go find a cure for the Empress.
It is pretty random, isn't it?
Yeah, totally random. I feel like we miss a lot, and it's one of those movies that we talk about. Movies should be like 90 minutes long. This is one that I wanted more. I wanted more explanation. I wanted more characters. I wanted how did he know where to go into different areas? We had the one clue of the Oracle, and that was it.
This will bring me a little bit to what my big pitch.
Go for it.
Okay. My favorite part of the book, okay, and thankfully, Wikipedia helps me remember a lot of stuff I forgot. But I did remember this part of the book because I remember when I read it as a kid, I liked dark stuff. I mean, obviously, I thought the Luck Dragon was one letter off. So my favorite part of the book was it was changed. See, the movie is only like the first half of the book, like I talked about. In the second half, Bastian actually becomes a ruler of Fantasia. And he becomes obsessed with his own power, uses the power of the Orin to make wishes that actually harm its people because he has power that he never imagined and he uses it for the wrong reasons, like many people would. I mean, he realizes his errors at the very end, and I think my pitch would be, our movie would be two movies. It would be the first half, kind of like the NeverEnding Story was, where you end the movie with him realizing these dreams and everything else. And then the movie would end at the very, very end, like the last shot would be some slight revelation that he just realized he has all the power in the world. And maybe he shouldn't.
like an evil look that he gives the camera or something.
Kind of like, or just a realization, because I don't want him. He shouldn't be a villain. He wasn't a villain really in the book. He just became consumed with, I could do anything I want. I can do anything I want, and he stops. He becomes selfish. Is really what happens, and it happens to a lot of kids. You go through that phase, and then he comes out on the other side once he understands himself a little better. So to me, that's a great twofold. I don't want a trilogy. Everything's a stinking trilogy. I think it would be a great twofold to have two movies. One where he learns how to capture his imagination, and the other one where, you know, that imagination almost costs him everything that he just earned, only to finally find himself and become the selfless kid that he was always meant to be.
I like that idea. My only caveat with that is that these movies would need to be released much closer to each other than, say, like the Lord of the Rings. Even a year to me feels too long. I would want this like one at the beginning of the summer, one at the end of the summer.
Well, if there are movies, we can do whatever we want. So
yeah,
sure. 2 weeks apart if you want, Scott.
And as much as I like that idea, I want to throw one more wrench in the fire as part of one of my big pitches.
Okay.
Is I still wanted to keep it one movie, or the possibility of 2 or 3, but I'm like you, I'm kind of sick of trilogies. What I want to do is they're not just be one character. I want there to be Bastian, but I want there to be 1 or 2 other characters that also somehow get a hold of this book, maybe at different points in time. Maybe one in a modern day, maybe one still in modern day, but either in the not too distant past or not too distant future, that reads the book. Because I love this idea that the story is specially tailored for each person that reads it. In my mind, if I read the book that Bastian read, I would have a different experience than what Bastian did. It would all be in the same world, but I would be entered into a different aspect of it. And I want them to all somehow come together at the end, maybe coming together from different points in time and solving whatever the problem of Fantasia is.
That is so amazing that is so close to an idea that I had.
Oh,
okay.
Well, tell your idea. Let's go.
You know, there would be like a group of kids, let's say 3 to 4 of them, that we establish the fact that they don't like each other at the beginning of the movie, and they all enter into this Fantasia world where they're interacting, via their, let's call it player character, like Dungeons and Dragons world. And they have their own character that's within the Fantasia world, and they're interacting with each other, and then they don't find out until the end who that real life equivalent was, and they now have an appreciation of the kid that they at one time didn't like at the beginning of the movie.
Go over that one more time, because I'm trying to get a good visual, I guess, representation of it.
Sticking to my 80s theme, because that's the way I roll.
Okay.
Think Breakfast Club. Everybody gets in at the beginning of the movie. They hardly know each other. They know of each other. They have specific type of people that they are, and they just don't really hang with each other. They don't appreciate each other. But in this case, our movie, they get this book, as we established, it's a book, to get into Fantasia, and they're controlling an Atreyu type person, and all of a sudden they have this story that they have to go through and this mystery to solve, and they're kind of controlling the character, and they have their own abilities, and they learn to trust each other as they're interacting with each other in the Fantasia world. And then at the end, they're learning their lessons about who you can trust and who you can interact with, and being kind of the real core essence of who these people are. And they find out who they were interacting with the whole time, and now they have an appreciation for each other.
So are you saying that these 4 people they all know each other before they read the book?
He just said 3 or 4.
To
he just
some
threw
degree.
Yeah.
Right. They know of each other, but they're not like friends.
Right. I really like that idea. Each of the 3 or 4 kids are reading the book. They're not like in a book club or something. They're just like independently happen to be reading the same book at the same time.
Right.
And then they all meet together in this fantasy world. That's kind of cool. What if you took that even a step further and even made each of the 4 kids reading the book having read the book in different points in time? Like someone's from modern day, somebody's from like medieval times, somebody's from the near future.
How would you do that in one? And I'm not trying to cut you guys. I think it's a great idea. I'm just trying to figure out how would that work in one movie.
And my whole point was wrapping it up at the end where they would be interacting with each other. If they're in different time zones, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. The Breakfast Club effect in NeverEnding Story. I like it.
Just trying to figure out how it would work.
Yeah, I know. That's what I love about doing this is I get more ideas as I talk it out with you guys, and then I just keep going around in circles. But we gotta land on something. So,
and really, what I was thinking was, if you want to comparison to like Dungeons and Dragons, you've got the wizard character, you've got the cavalier, or all the different type of speciality type characters, and then each one of these people would have those type of abilities, and then they would learn to rely on each other to fulfill the mission.
And you could still have your aspect of it too, Aaron, where our quote unquote main character uses his wishes for bad, and then in the sequel the other two or three characters are trying to convince him that what he's doing is wrong.
I think you would almost have to go like 3 movies to make all that work, because there's just so much world, I think. Which, right. I mean, it is a world that could definitely do that. What if, it's Peter Jackson, so we can make a trilogy that's 12 hours long. The first movie is the closest in nature to the story, the original book, where it's still Bastian. He gets involved, so you get about 3/4 of the way through the movie, and that's where this first movie ended. So he discovers the Fantasia, or he saves Fantasia. He learns that he can dream about everything. He does some dream fulfillment. And then another character comes into the same book in a different area and starts reading it. And basically it picks up where he has begun his ascension to being power hungry. And then it kind of leaves off with basically this character reading the book in the world, finding Bastian as he becomes obsessed with power or whatever. Then it cuts to the next movie where you've got 2 other friends somewhere else that are reading, and they tell their story, and that's where everybody comes in. I got lost somewhere in my own train of thought there.
Yeah, it almost sounded like you were going like an Ender's Game kind of thing, where you had the same story going on, but now it's a different perspective. Yeah,
kind of. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking to make all those ideas work, so that, because I think if you get 4 different stories, we would get lost, because it wouldn't be about the one quest. I think if you took like a couple, whatever the number of movies is, 2 or 3, and you start the first one up, and then Bastian, it's still Bastian, because that's the character everybody knows. If they go to NeverEnding Story and it doesn't have Bastian, I think people would freak out. Then 3/4 of the way is where he basically saves Fantasia, or maybe even halfway. The quest, like his portion of it is handled, and then somebody else somewhere else finds the same book and begins their play where they see his ascension to power, and it leaves off when they see that maybe Bastian took imagination too far. And then the next movie would pick up with someone else reading. They would come into the world with the girl from the first movie, and then they would band with someone else who was reading, and then those 3 would go, and almost like a Wizard of Oz thing, but try to reach Bastian, and then all 4 of them, after Bastian finally realized he was being selfish and he was wrong, because of these other 3 that came into the world with their imaginations, and they were able to finally leave.
I like that idea, especially because in the second movie, when you come back to Fantasia, it can look completely different, because it was almost completely destroyed in the first movie before Bastian saved it. And now that he's got this ability to make his unlimited wishes to rebuild Fantasia, he builds it whatever way he wants to. So it could almost be like an even more twisted version of Fantasia now that he's started to become more selfish and do what he wants. So you don't have to rely on it being like the same set or having the same locations. It can be a completely different.
Oh yeah, because between the first movie and the second movie, after the girl gets involved, like he's done what he's done to the world. So when we come back, the world is completely different.
Yeah, and I like the darker tone of it too.
Yeah, and so
that would totally work.
You can even you could probably do that in 2 movies.
Yeah, you could do that in 2 movies.
Yeah.
You could. So how many total characters would that be then? Would that be like you'd have 2 in the second movie plus the girl? Would you have like 3 plus Bastian, or would you keep it smaller?
I would keep it smaller. Do Bastian. Make the first movie Bastian. That'll make the fans of the original movie happy to kind of keep it the same story, but leave it open ended, like you said, where Bastian kind of gets this evil look and roll credits. And then the second movie, you're introduced to 2 more characters that almost starts the exact same way. You could even do whatever way they find the book is the same way, but let's read this book together. You go home and then we'll get back and talk together, almost like a book club. And then they realize that they get to be in this world together while they're reading it, and then they learn about what happened in the previous movie and goes from there. I like it.
Yeah, I was just thinking that through, and I mean, it kind of went away from the theme of, to appreciate the real world person, that they didn't really interact with each other, but I really love the way that we're going with the effect of now it's a different world, and Bastian has gotten power hungry or corrupt. And it'd be a much different world and way darker, which I think really would help the movie a lot, or the movies in this case. No, I like it a lot.
Oh, sweet. I think we finally arrived at a movie. Woohoo. So 2 movies, really.
Yes,
Oof.
it's two-parter.
Oof. The only other thing is I really want, I think it's Grammel the Many. That's the giant spider. There's a giant spider in the book, where Atreyu isn't saved by Falkor in the swamp after Mark's attack. He actually rescues Falkor from the spider. They didn't have that. The spider was cool. They couldn't afford it, I think, is why they cut it. But that was a really cool. That's just a personal thing. I would just really like that somewhere in there.
I got another bold thing I want to throw at you and see what you guys think.
Okay, but are we decided on before we get there? Are we decided on the actual movies? Like we're gonna have 2 movies, and that's how we're gonna do it. Bastian, it's gonna end.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
I'm on board with that.
Sweet. NeverEnding Story is gonna end in 2 stories. Scotty, what were you gonna say?
My big bold thing that I have a suggestion to do on this is I want to go full James Cameron on it.
What does that mean?
Make it like Avatar.
You want to make it suck?
No.
I said it.
Visually, I want it to look like Avatar, where you're using real actors to portray the human characters, but you're also using the digital effects for the world of Fantasia, much like the world of Pandora. Is it Pandora?
Oh, you don't want puppets, is what you're saying.
Right. I don't want puppets.
Practical
I love
effects
practical effects, but for the breadth that I feel this movie could go, and where I want it to go, it's got to have some digital effects. And I think when you go into digital effects, you're going to be going back and forth between digital and practical. And how much money is Disney going to throw at this thing?
Honestly, you would have to, probably. This day and age, I think you would have to.
But I still want the humanity in it, like in Avatar.
I think, man, I don't know.
That's the part that I'm worried about, because you think NeverEnding Story and the appeal of it from the original is a lot of the practical effects.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you're going to, by changing that into CGI, it's going to take away from the people that enjoy the nostalgia of that, of the original movie.
That's true, but you're also going to have less outcasts from the cantina scene in Star Wars.
This good point.
I think, here's what I think. I think when you have a first assembly where they're trying to determine who's going to go forth in the quest, and I assume we're still going to have that scene. That's where you have more practical effects. You could have some merged in with CGI, but I think CGI has come so far. I mean, The Hobbit really convinced me that was a real dragon, which is what the Luck Dragon really should look like.
Mm-hmm.
It should look like Smaug. It shouldn't look like whatever the hell that thing was. And I think you need CGI for those kinds of things. But there's smaller stuff where they could do some more practical stuff, I suppose.
What do you think about going full Wizard of Oz and have it real life in the real world and then digital once you're in Fantasia? Or, Avatar-ish when you go into Fantasia?
Well, I mean, if you're going to do special effects, do special effects. So, yeah, I mean, the real world doesn't need any. I mean, how hard is an attic?
Right, that's what I mean. Like, it can be actual regular film in the real world. And when you go into Fantasia, that's when it goes full Avatar.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like the look of film, like the old school film. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. Kind of a little retro look for the real world. And then go just crazy and CGI the crap out of it so it looks like that Warcraft trailer. I get a really big question, though. The Empress, when they name her, will it still be Moonchild?
No.
Does anybody have anything better?
That sounds too Born in a Teepee name to me.
I mean, if that's even, how he finally saves Fantasia, is it still from the naming the Empress? I mean, it seems like that's the whole context of the book. So
I like that. I just never understood how naming an Empress is going to save Fantasia.
Agreed. I didn't get that.
So how would you do it?
Understand that, it was going to be something as, I don't know, trivial as just throwing a name out.
I like the idea of it being something trivial, but I'd like it to be something that makes a little bit more sense than just giving the girl a name.
Maybe he has a piece of the, how do you call it? Power.
The Orin?
The Orin.
Orin.
Maybe he has they give him a piece of the Orin, and the Empress has the other piece to connect it that gives him the power.
They got like those best friend necklaces where it's split
That's
down in
kind of
half.
what I was thinking, yeah. All right, maybe you made it sound a lot worse than it.
But it's the Orin like split in half with a jagged edge down the middle.
Your piece lines up with my piece. We are soulmates.
So have you guys ever seen the movie The Last Dragon?
Oh, yeah. Show enough.
Yeah, and so I just, at the end of it, he's got this thing where all of a sudden he realizes he's the master, and then he gets the glow. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, is it something like that where it's just like, oh, okay, I've had this power all along, and now I've got to acknowledge it, and then I'm okay now.
Oh, like, so he's reading the story as Atreyu, and he thinks he has to go on this quest to find the Empress, name her, and then when he gets there, that's when she basically tells him, the power is in you, that sort of thing. You just have to realize it, and that's where he understands what it means.
Right, and then he gets the glow, and then he can catch a bullet in his mouth.
Oh, okay. That would be pretty fantastic. I mean, awful.
I crossed the streams on the 80s stuff, so.
That's pretty good. I would watch that movie. I don't think anybody else would, but I'd watch it. So seriously, is that how you want to do it as opposed to naming? I know some people are like screaming, no, you got to have the name. You got to have the name. But do we? Really? Do we?
Man, it's hard to give up. But like I said, I'm contradicting myself because it doesn't make any sense. But it is Fantasia as well.
You guys got to decide. You're the biggest fans of it, so what do you want to do? Or bigger than myself, honestly. Because honestly, I would have done the best friends necklace. So...
So then is the question, does he have to name her and it's going to be Moonchild, or is the question just, does he have to do something in order to save Fantasia?
In order to save Fantasia, which happens roughly near the end of our first movie, in order to save Fantasia, what does he have to do? Because I think we need to determine that. If we're going to stick with the Moonchild, because that was a big portion of the original movie. So, well,
I think that the key to him using the name Moonchild was that it was his mother's name. Mm-hmm. And I think coming back to making the story his own, that was the one thing that he was able to contribute to the story to make it his own, was a name that meant something to him. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the key. Is it's almost him writing the story is him entering the name into the story that meant something to him, and that's what the draw was. But from like we keep saying, like the logistical aspect of saving Fantasia, why can't just anybody? Why does it have to be someone from the human world? And why does it not matter what name? He just shouts out any name. Well, why is that? How does that fix everything?
Because I think the concept of the book of the movie, to me, just watching the movie, like taking away the book, just watching the movie, was that it isn't so much that you actually accomplish any kind of task. It was that you read it to the end, and it was really just something as simple as just throwing out a name. And only the person reading the book can determine what that name is. You're in total control of saving our world. And I think that's really, it was just throwing the concept of, sincerely, it's all in your hands back to the reader, is really what that was.
Yeah, and like going back to the childhood innocence thing, as a kid, something like that, it doesn't have to make sense. That's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. Naming the Empress saves Fantasia. We don't have to have an explanation.
Well, the way I saw it was that it was one of those things where, he knew didn't know what he had to do, but he was like, he would say these things to himself, but not like out loud and own it. And it was kind of the moment where he had to believe in himself and actually own the, here's what the name should be, or here's what's the name's going to be, rather than they should choose my mother's name. That was a beautiful name. And then, kind of to himself. So it's kind of that moment where I'm going to step up and I'm going to contribute.
And I'm fully embracing that I am part of this world now.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Because I think that's part of his reservation for not wanting to. I mean, granted, outside of the conversation with his dad who told him he had to keep his head from out of the clouds, mm-hmm. he was not willing to share that memory of his mother with what he was still considering to be just a book. When he finally let go and gave up that name, like you said, he was realizing, okay, I'm a part of this story that is actually a real thing now. That was his accepting it.
So now bringing this back to Aaron's question, how do we wrap that up with our movie to have that same kind of moment? Oh, that is a great question, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because my gut feeling, right? My gut feeling is if you have something, an element that is causing that much discourse or debate and you're unsure if there's a better way to go, then maybe the best way to go is the way that the original went. Maybe we are overthinking it because for us, it makes no sense. And like Scott was saying, it's not supposed to make sense. It's supposed to be like, it just doesn't make sense. But that's why, because your imagination doesn't need to make sense because you can find sense in it.
Yeah, I'm leaning more towards that way too. Just because, it bothered me now. It didn't bother me at all when I was a kid. Come up with a name for Save the World.
I just don't think it needs to be Moonchild. I mean, can't you just like Sarah or something like that? I mean, some very pretty, maybe a little more unique, but not quite so 70s.
Maybe make it indistinguishable. How
I like that. That I like.
How I was going back and rewinding it, trying to hear it. Make it so that you can't actually hear it. Maybe the storm gets so loud and you can't read his lips, what he's saying. It's a mystery. I
like that. And the reason thank you for saying that, because the reason I like that is because because everybody kept saying that they couldn't make out what the name was for the longest time. I actually thought that was a really smart move on the part of the producers, because I thought they were trying to give people watching the opportunity to name the Empress themselves. By making it indistinguishable, everybody watching the movie had to feel, I got to put a name to that now. I'm part of the movie. I'm part of Fantasia. I thought that was brilliant, and then it turns out it wasn't actually what they did.
It was Moonchild.
And since we're making the movie anyway, it's going to be we're going to get more ticket sales that way, right? Because people are going to be like, you've got to go to this movie and then tell me what he says at the end, because I think it's this.
Exactly.
No. You pull a clue, and she's got 3 different movies, and her name is a different one at the end of each one.
She got 3 different endings. Yep.
Perfect.
Exactly. I think we agree. Hoo-ah! We are there. The only thing I think that is left is the divorce. Are they divorced then? I mean, it could still be his mom if they're divorced. That could still be an important part. She's gone. They split up. He hasn't seen her in some time, and he's still struggling with that. He blames himself for it. So he hasn't wanted to say.
I like that she's dead. I think that name has more meaning to him that she's gone and is a memory than if she is gone, but he still sees her on the weekends.
No, I like Aaron's take on this.
Okay, what was my take?
I like the idea of there being some sort of real world resolution for this kid.
So the divorce, you prefer to go back? Okay.
Yeah, I prefer the divorce angle.
All right.
Cut.
All right. You're gonna yell cut?
Going to yell cut.
This was your original idea, jackass.
I know, and I'm cutting it down.
You're cutting your own idea.
I am. I thought about it.
All right. What's your cut? How are you gonna do it?
She's gonna be dead.
So she's dead. So what's the real world resolution? Do we have to? Does that mean bullies are back?
Not necessarily. Do we have to have a real world resolution if he's going to be in Fantasia in the second movie?
I don't need it. You guys are the one that wanted it. I didn't want it. It's your cut.
Well, that was before we came up with our awesome idea about 2 more friends going into Fantasia in the sequel.
This is true.
Yeah, but I mean, we're still going to have that element, though, right? Of having either at the end of, it doesn't necessarily need to be at the end of the first one, but at the end of the second one, where we have them being able to use the imaginary interaction in the real world. I mean, I think that's a very important part of the whole movie.
Yeah, but couldn't we just have him riding a dragon or coming to take his dad for a ride on the dragon?
Yeah.
Well, that's a little less exciting.
Well, it depends. I mean...
Well, okay. Thinking about that a little bit more, you're right. If the father is like the one from the original, where he's like, you need to keep your head out of the clouds, and you've got to be straight-laced and practical. And then all of a sudden, his son presents him with here's this opportunity. Let's go for a ride on this luck dragon.
Yeah.
And it'll help the father evolve into going, all right, I need to be a little more open.
Yeah,
exactly.
I like that.
Me too.
It's so much better than bullies. So much better than bullies. I think this movie's going to rock, and a lot of people are going to go see it. Man, I think we've got a movie, guys.
We got one more thing to discuss, though.
Oh, what more could there be?
Does the song stay, or does the song get axed?
Oh, the song stays.
Thank you.
NeverEnding Story.
I think it should be redone by the band Atreyu.
The band that's actually named after the character?
Yes.
That's
How awesome would that be?
What if
Have
they
them do
suck?
a ballad of NeverEnding Story.
Oh, God. I just don't want to hear that song in my head again. I just don't. But
It's so good, though. So good.
all right. I think
So
we got...
what, you had those other clips, but you don't have a clip of the song? Come on.
No, I will. You'll hear it when you hear the edit. You will hear
Okay.
it. Okay, I think we got our movie. So we start with Bastian. He's reeling from his mother's death. Dad says, keep your head in the clouds. He goes, finds the book, takes him to the roof, or takes him to the attic, reads the book, gets lost in Fantasia. We sprinkle in those elements that we've talked about. We don't want to recycle all of them. You'll hear some of them in the trailer. He saves Fantasia at the end, but as the movie ends, you see that the power is with him. After he's done all the fantastic stuff, he's gone for the ride with his dad on a dragon, luck dragon, and then you see a little tinge of what's to come. And then in the second and final movie, we see two characters that are lost in that world, and they're actually in Fantasia while Bastian has risen to that power, and they have to some degree, come to grips and go on their own quest to bring him down. And then at the end, he's redeemed, and he finds out that he's really not so bad.
I like it.
Okay, we got a movie. Now, who should direct it? My first pick is Brad Bird. I'm just going to throw it out there. Brad Bird. He directed Tomorrowland and The Iron Giant, The Incredibles.
That's a really good call. Yeah, that kind of shoots my my pitch for Matthew Vaughn out the window.
No, that's not bad either. X-Men First Class.
And Stardust. As much as I wasn't a big fan of that movie visually, and the charm and wonder in that movie, I thought worked really well.
I was actually going a completely different angle on it. I was
Tarantino.
looking at it so much from the fantastical point. I was looking at it more of the telling the story with heart.
Okay.
So I was picking Charles Martin Smith, who actually did the director for Dolphin Tale.
Oh,
Aaron loved that movie.
I did. I know I'm in the minority, but I did love some Dolphin Tale.
Really what I was looking at was, how to have the thought process around the theme and the heart of the movie rather than the fantastical elements. And now that we've done what we did with it, I like your idea better, Brad Bird.
Sweet. Brad Bird it is.
Yep, I like Brad Bird as well. I think I like the idea of Matthew Vaughn, but I think that his movies are steering more towards the Kick-Ass and Kingsman route instead, and I don't want that at all in NeverEnding Story.
Now, normally we would cast the two lead characters in our, well, there's two movies really we've come up with, but the first movie there's really Bastian and
Atreyu.
Yeah,
Falcor.
Falcor. So I would honestly say whenever it comes to kids, I don't like to mess with it because you just never know. I mean, unless you guys have somebody in mind, I had
one for Atreyu, actually. I didn't have one for Bastian, but
okay.
You mentioned Tomorrowland, and the kid in that movie, his name is Pierce. Is it Gagnon? Gagnon?
Oh yeah, it was very good.
He's got a real fierce look to him. I want Atreyu to be more fierce instead of and not that there's anything wrong with it, but Atreyu was very effeminate.
Yeah, he was.
And
his shirt was open, billowing in the wind next to the luck dragon.
And I understand that was part of the story of, he's just a boy. He's not this brave warrior, but he's got to have
I'm just a boy looking for a dragon. Sorry.
You are just really changing the movie perspective for me. I gotta tell you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
No, that's it. You know the kid I'm talking about, right? He was also in Looper.
Yep, yeah. He was good. He's good.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. Do you got anybody?
And I actually came up with a voice cast for Falcor as well.
Morgan Freeman.
No, worse.
Samuel L. Jones or Jackson.
Samuel L. Jones?
I don't know. Sam Jones from the 80s, yeah.
Sean Connery.
Is he alive still?
He's still alive.
He's still around.
And he did that movie Dragonheart, where he played the dragons,
with
and
Dennis
those movies were
Quaid.
Awful. Those movies were not that good.
You shut up. That
Sean
first one was
Connery
good.
as the dragon was really well done, and I wanted to see more of that.
I like Dragonheart, so I'm just ignoring everything you're saying right now.
Well, I like the story. I did not like the execution.
You're an 80s guy, Dave. Did you like Dragonheart? It's gotta be
that
80s.
was 90s.
Was it 90s? Okay, well, never mind.
That was 90s.
It's pretty close.
I like the voice of the dragon. You got that right.
Yeah.
That's all I want.
Yeah.
Although these days it'd be a little bit like, oh, Sean Connery, because he's old. He's super old. David, is there anybody that you wanted to cast in this? You want to throw in the mix?
I was trying to think of modern kid actors, and I just really don't follow them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And really the only thing that I could come up with, and it doesn't even even saying out loud doesn't even work that well for me, is Atreyu as Chandler Riggs from Walking Dead.
I tell you what, I don't really care. So you guys can fight amongst yourselves.
Isn't he like 40 now?
Yeah, I mean, he does have like a full beard, I think, at this point.
Yeah, all right. Well, then he probably wouldn't work then. So, like I said, I really don't keep up with, the child actors. Because in my house, if it's Disney movie is what's on, and it's not
Falcor does.
I'm not even staying in the room, so.
He sure does. He sure does. All right, well, I think we got our movie. I think we got a couple actors in the mix. I'm sure you guys might have some ideas. If you have anybody you think should be cast, be sure to send us to that at remakeismovieright@gmail.com. We did determine what the nostalgic moments are going to be for our remake, moments from the original movie that have to be in our remake. You ready? We got 5 of them. These are pulled from all 3 of us. So you guys ready for the final 5?
Yes, sir.
Number 5, there has to be a nod to this line. Here we just sell small rectangular objects. They're called books. They require little effort on your part and make no beep, 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 beeps. That has to be in there.
I like it.
Number 4, the Arn. It's spelled Auryn, so there you go.
It's like aura, but Orin.
Okay, the Orin. Number 3, the Luck Dragon has to be in there because we all like, the guy that drives an ice cream truck. Number 2, Artax dying in the Swamp of Sadness.
Oh, yeah.
Good
luck making that as sad.
That'll make you go. And number 1 is the song. The song is number 1. Has to be in our movie. Please be remade, not the original song. I can't hear that again for the rest of my life. It is almost time for our final trailer, but before we do that, we've got one more clip from the original movie. Are you guys ready?
Ready.
All right.
Ready.
Don't you know anything about Fantasia? It's the world of human fantasy. Every part, every creature of it is a piece of the dreams and hopes of mankind. Therefore, it has no boundary.
But why is Fantasia dying then?
Because people have begun to lose their hopes and forget their dreams. So the nothing grows stronger.
What is the nothing?
It's the emptiness that's left. It is like a despair destroying this world. And I have been trying to help it.
It's cool. It's kind of like a Bond villain. Just gives you all the information you need right there at the end.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was a really creepy voice, though. I gotta be honest.
Yeah, it does.
All right, guys. I think that's gonna do it for that portion. It is time to hear all that stuff we just talked about wrapped up into one sweet and sexy trailer gifted to you from Wayne Henderson, courtesy of MediaVoiceovers.com. Take it away, Wayne. I want to hear all about our new NeverEnding Story.
Bastian is a young man who spends too much time with his head in the clouds. After the loss of his mother and some chastising from his father, Bastian steals a book from the local bookstore and hides himself away in his school attic to disappear into the land of Fantasia. This is no ordinary book, though. There are no beep, beep, beeps. This book requires Bastian to toss his own reality aside and allow himself to become lost in the story of Atreyu, a young warrior tasked with saving the Empress and Fantasia itself from the plague overtaking the lands known as the Nothing. After temptation strikes, will Bastian succumb to absolute power? Or can 2 other heroes help Bastian save them all? Join director Brad Bird for a 2-film event where ordinary readers become extraordinary heroes in a magical tale where anything can happen. Get ready, because once you start, you will never want it to stop. This Christmas, strap yourself in and get comfortable. You're about to begin the never-ending story.
Great job, Wayne.
Yes. Wayne. That was awesome.
That was good. Well, we talked a super long time about it. It was like the never-ending podcast. Are you guys happy, Dave? First time on the show. Are you happy about how it turned out?
Oh, definitely. That was I love the give and take of the ideas, and just really working together with you guys to remake the movie right.
Wow, well done. See that, Scott?
Thank
Why
you.
can't you be
You like
this
that?
good? Yeah, I do. Put that on a T-shirt. And before we finish up, why don't you go ahead and tell people where they can find you?
You can find me mostly on Twitter. I'm on @80sreboot, but we have a lot of different ways to get a hold of us. There's 80s Reboot on Tumblr, so that's 80sreboot.tumblr.com. We're also on Facebook, which is facebook.com/80sreboot. We also have a blog, so you can get us at southgatemediagroup.com. Click the blog section, look for the little 80s Reboot Overdrive icon, click in there, and then also email 80sreboot@gmail.com.
All right, Scott. What about you? Are you happy with the results?
I really am. I like that we held to the nostalgia in the first movie and then kind of went the rest of the book in the second one. I like that we're going to make the nostalgia people happy, but also make a new movie for new audiences. So
yeah,
very happy with that.
And where can people find you?
Well, for those that aren't familiar, I am on the Hollywood Outsider with this idiot. We get together every Thursday. You can listen on that podcast. I also have a podcast of my own called The Gaming Outsider. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher. We've also got a Twitter at the GoCast, and our website is thegamingoutsider.com.
Definitely check it out. So now you've got 80s movies, you've got games, you've got remakes, and you can find me at thehollywoodoutsider.com or the Blacklist Exposed if you happen to be a fan of that specific show. What did you guys think? Did we nail it, or do you think you got a better pitch? Do you have a more complicated pitch? Because I'd like to hear that. Email us your thoughts on this week's show. Short thoughts, guys, a paragraph. RemakeThisMovieRight@gmail.com. It's RemakeThisMovieRight@gmail.com. And we might mention you on the next teaser episode. Teaser episodes never go on the website. They're only in the feed. So if you subscribe, you'll get them. If you don't subscribe, you'll never have to see them. That's how it works. Review us on iTunes, thumbs up on Stitcher, put our RSS feed in your podcast app of choice. Another shout out to Wayne Henderson. Thanks for all you do. MediaVoiceovers.com. We do have a Remake This Movie Right Facebook group, not just for fans of our shows, people who just want to talk about the remakes coming out, as well as the Hollywood Outsider. Link is always in the show notes. RemakeThisMovieRight.com or tweet us at RemakeRight. We just really started getting that going. I'm really bad with the Twitter. What do you want me to tell you? It's just the way I am.
Really bad with the Twitter.
With the Twitter, exactly. With the Twitter. My tweets are not as good. My tweets are not strong.
It's a series of tubes.
It is. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of Remake This Movie Right. And remember, guys, the next movie you watch, it will get a remake someday, and only you can make it better. Take care.